And at this point, I'll hand over to Chris here for our first talk on State of the Map Scotland. Okay, Chris.
Thanks for coming. This talk was definitely sorry, I'll introduce myself. My name's Chris Fleming. I'm a local mapper, really local to Edinburgh. I've been mapping pretty much since very, very early days in Edinburgh, so I always say I was very privileged that I got to start on basically on an empty map and start filling it in, which is a lot less intimidating than for new people starting today, where there's a lot more risk, and your mistakes can be a lot more public if you make them. Hopefully, I think it's the next slide. Yeah. So obviously, let's talk about Scotland. I'll go through a little bit why I did the talk, and maybe hopefully tell you some stories about some interesting things that I've seen in Scotland. 20 minutes isn't that long. I've only really finished writing my talk maybe half an hour ago, so I've no idea how long it is. I've probably got too much content, I'm hoping. But I'm going to try not to go too fast. Let me know if you keep up. Who here is from Scotland and who's from... Okay, so most of us are locals here. That's kind of good. So I'm not going to talk too much about where we are. I think you all know it. But I was probably going to start saying, I didn't really want to do this talk, but Gregory can be quite persuasive. And on the fifth time of him saying, is anything to do a State of the Map Scotland talk, I figured that I maybe needed to look at some of my old slides. Really, the reason for it is, originally when I started, we had some local events and local State of the Map Scotland conferences, and actually a lot of that was really about promoting OpenStreetMap and the OpenStreetMap community. And really, I was trying to say, look, it looks a bit shambolic, but the data's getting there, it's getting better. I really need to check where the data was. Now, in those days, really, we were just like, do we even have all the roads? I kind of dug up some old screenshots. So this is what the centre of Edinburgh looked in November 2007. 5 years later, in August 2012, we thought we were doing pretty well. We had all the roads on, kind of a random selection of buildings that we were quite happy with. But it's amazing when you kind of start doing that, actually. I then looked at where we are now. I didn't change the date. 2025, that should be. Yeah, there's a lot more detail. One thing I thought was quite interesting is that when you go back to the... Oh, in fact, I didn't put it in there. Yeah, there's just a lot more detail over there now, which is great. But actually, that was really what I was thinking. I was like, actually, we've done all the roads. There's still work to be done. There's still a lot of residential houses, buildings like that to be mapped. But the original driver I didn't have. And you can kind of see that, again, did some of the kind of data analysis that I quite like to do. And actually, for the major road types, we're not really changing very much, are they? It's kind of beautifully static. And I think that's kind of what we want to see. The map is mature. Certainly, most of the things. There are some changes. Things are changing. I thought it was kind of interesting that unclassified roads are going down and there's more tertiary roads. I think some of those roads are being probably mapped as residential. So we've kind of got a changing, maybe at the bottom end of the road hierarchy, a bit of back and forth in terms of how you classify roads. Obviously, there's the kind of new road kind of pipeline. It's interesting. Yeah, I thought it was kind of curious that, we kind of had 10 kilometres less of construction roads than last year, but all the other road types are just slowly kind of increasing. The motorway one, obviously someone tweaked something somewhere and it's just slightly shorter than it was before. Who knows? Kind of going to the middle of the table, these are just some kind of random ones that I pulled out. Again, just to really see what are people mapping, what kind of roads, what kind of things. And actually, again, tracks are actually, it's a huge, probably I think they're the longest road, highway type that we have in OpenStreetMap in Scotland. And actually, even this year, there's been over 1,000 kilometres of new tracks mapped. Footways, paths, a lot less than that. Cycleways, 218 kilometres. So actually, these things are getting added. I was kind of curious to see bridleway come up there. I think, again, if most of us from Scotland, we don't tend to map bridleways as bridleways in Scotland. I can see Donald's going, what? So there's something to... I expect them all to be fixed by the end of the conference. Obviously, with Right to Roam, basically everything then is controlled by access. And actually, in theory, the default for those you go for any path could be yes for anything that's not motorised. We do tend to use the access tags and tend to tag things. The bikes can go on there where it's sensible to take a bike. I don't know if anybody knows Marcus. He's a kind of quite famous for going around the world on a fixie. He does a lot of stuff on Commute, and I think he was working for them at one point. But I've seen him going and adding cycle equals yes to tags to make the routing work, and I'm always a little bit skeptical because I've been on some of his routes, and they're like bikes, but if you're mad. So there's some kind of fun in that. But it's kind of good to see. And then at the bottom is where I think some of the fun things are. I noticed, I'll go through these in a second, there's some scramble, highway equals scramble, which definitely isn't approved anywhere. But I'll go through in a second. I kind of almost quite like it, so I might maybe say this is maybe something we should think about. And I think everybody will tell me it's probably already covered by the existing tags. But it was quite interesting where I saw where that came from. I also quite like the fact that there's 194 kilometres of steps. That's for you, Jerry. If you want to climb all of them in Scotland. And we're mapping all that stuff, so that's all quite fun. So I was looking at this highway equals scramble. I don't know if you guys can see on the screen there, but there's a kind of a path that comes in from the kind of north, and there's a path at the bottom, and there's a river crossing, and it looks like, and actually the other three elements are all part of that same way. Now, when I was looking at this, I thought it was quite interesting because there'd obviously been a bit of a discussion there with the data working group. There was a big change set here, and I thought, again, this is kind of interesting because actually it was done by, the original change was done by Glencoe NMR Ranger, which I'm not totally sure what organisation that is, but clearly someone that is working, maintaining that land, and they've done quite a lot of deletions. Discussion actually is very good. It's kind of almost ideally what you want when someone's done something they've maybe gone a bit far, changed a bit too much. So the end of it, they kind of came up with an agreement. The other ones that went as this path here. So this is in the editor mode. Again, don't think the screen's probably quite good enough to see, but you can kind of see the path at the top kind of peters out to the bit that was then described as scramble, and then there's another route coming across there that was just deleted. And again, I think we take the guy that works there and runs it that isn't a suitable path. Again, within that, there's like, I bumped into tourists who were following a map on their phone, and I don't really want them to be there. And again, this is where you have that tension. Again, I think it was covered in the National Trust thing a bit, because actually, I think sometimes the people whose jobs it are to keep people safe or look after them would rather they just didn't even try and go there. And again, I think sometimes the apps aren't that good at necessarily using all the tags in the way they should to decide what doesn't and doesn't get displayed. Hence, highway equals scramble. And I think this path was set to path equals no, just to kind of indicate to future mappers. And again, I think with the change set history, it's quite there. In a similar vein, there was a. In fact, just for those of you that I don't think that comes out very well, but that's what that area looks like from aerial imagery. So you can kind of see the hills and the valleys and all the rivers and stuff. It's quite cool on one of the topology maps. In a similar vein, I actually spotted it earlier in the summer, a note that had been open for 6 years, and I managed to drag this is a note that's quite hard to, because you actually got to go out and foot and climb not that big hill, but a decent hill, to get there and actually have a look. So sure enough, we're away. I took the family. That was the peak that we had to get up to get there. It was probably worth it. It's quite a good view from the top. It's probably one of the better climbs. I definitely recommend anybody that's not been up Benan to go up there. It's not actually that high, and it's kind of, we got up, down, and drove the car back and got the car hired back to Edinburgh in the same day. So it's not too ambitious as a climb. And then on the way down, I was kind of having to look for this path. And actually what I think is quite good is actually that path that 6 years ago, whoever got a reply when I closed it from the guy, but they hadn't been able to find the path. And I think probably it looks from, I never managed to follow it again, I was with the family, but you can see kind of clearly there is a path to follow going down that way. Now I do wonder, is there a path there now because someone mapped there as a path and then it's been used and got bigger? It's kind of an interesting, and again, then there's all the impacts of that, which is the erosion. I touched a little bit on right to roam in Scotland, so actually you can go wherever you want. So there's not the same need to maintain what's an official path and what's an unofficial path. It's either a path or not, and if it's a path and it's not going through someone's garden, you can pretty much go there. Or if it's not even a path and it's not going through someone's garden, you can go there, which is nice. I kind of forget that sometimes when I'm in England and just want to go walking off somewhere, and everybody's like, "What? You can't go there." I know. So anyway, so you can see the path there. So the other thing to do is look at some of the other sources. Just before I close it off, I just wanted to make sure. So actually the Strava heat map is always really good for this kind of thing. You can kind of see that actually that path looked pretty well used. And then the other thing I always look at is the change set history. It was originally created 16 years ago, so it actually is well established on the map. And actually quite good. The changes had been, I'm making a tweak here. This is like fix the footway to a path, which is the kind of classic, certainly fix up. And then there were some alignment things. I think this user said, oh, actually, no, with that side, there's a star there that you don't use, and with that side of the fence. So actually, there'd been a good number of fixes and people improving it. So that's kind of great, because that means I was very happy to close that note off. But actually, that's the challenge. So that's why having someone that knows the area well and is going there regularly that can kind of make those calls, because actually the only way really to be sure, I think, is to go and visit it, see that there is a path, and then actually the change to history and things just helps out. The other one I hadn't seen on the map in Scotland before was the Via Ferrata. Do people think they know where that is? Yeah, nobody's going to shout it out. Yeah, it's the Ely, the chain walk. And actually, I didn't even know we had that specific tab. It was only actually changed quite recently, about 3 months ago. It's one of those tags that seems relatively controversial. I noticed that the standard OpenStreetMap rendering doesn't display it as a path, but some of the other renderings, I meant to screenshot those, but some of the other renderings do. I think the topology rendering does cover it, so I don't think it's a bad way of going in. And actually, if you went down there again expecting a normal walk, it's definitely a bit more skilled than that. So that covers that particular bit of tagging. So that's quite good. And there's another one more on highways. I kind of quite like to tell the story. The other talk that's happening in the other room is related directly to this, because it's to do with audio mapping. But we had a lovely note come on, which was someone saying, oh, I'm in Street Complete, can you add these tags? One of the users got back to him quite quickly going, oh, it's already added. And then we managed to ease it a bit out of Adam, but this was a blind map user. So this is someone who's using one of the audio apps to navigate. And actually what's great to see is actually that kind of stuff that isn't displayed on any map, the kind of, what kind of surface is this, the kind of stuff that Street Complete generally gets you to get, actually is really valuable. There's someone, and they've done quite a few little edits and changes and questions on the map in Edinburgh quite regularly. There is a community of people that are using that data, and actually it's vital to them. And again, this is the strength of OpenStreetMap. I don't think there is another map anywhere in the world that is actually recording that data. So, it does make you go, this is really worthwhile. It's the kind of stuff you never really, certainly I never imagined would be possible or would happen when I started mapping. And it's just really great to see, and actually that kind of stuff I think makes a real difference. So it's kind of cool. I'm not going to read it all the way down. Yeah, while my app can read descriptions across things such as sounds, lights, it's strongly recommended. Yeah, basically they're saying it's useful. I'm not going to read it all out today. Really powerful. I'm just looking at the time. It's ticking away quite quickly. There's another highway I quite like. So this is, someone did a change quite recently, and they were like, I just want to make sure that this is a classified road, but it is just gravel. And sure enough, when you zoom in on the island, it's obviously a B road that does peter out to track. And up until some point, I assume the user that made that change knows enough to decide maybe the B road should end before it becomes track, but I'm not going to question it too much. And actually, the humanitarian style is quite nice, because that does change the rendering of the unsurfaced to show that. Slight change of topic, but it's still related. I think most of us have been this. Have you ever gone into a shop to go, what kind of shop are you? I've got a photo of an example, because I came across this Intrepid, and it says Adventure Essentials, and there's someone sitting drinking a cup of coffee outside. I didn't go into the shop, but I asked the guys who were having the coffee, or they were like looking at me, and I was like, so what kind of shop is this? And they were like, oh, it's an outdoors shop. And I was like, but they also sell coffee, and they're like, it's also a coffee shop. Obviously, we know how to solve that problem. It's 2 nodes. But I think it kind of, it's kind of one of those fun things. And again, most people look at you a bit funny when you're looking at shops in that way. Is this a florist? Is it a gift shop? Depends whether you're a local or a tourist. Just some stats, I thought these were really interesting. So again, this is in Scotland. This is beginning of the year compared to now. We've mapped 160 convenience stores, 182 new hairdressers. And actually that's the order things came in. So hairdresser is the kind of second biggest number of shop equals in Scotland after convenience stores. I think it makes sense. And actually, vacant stores are 707 charity. So there's more vacant shops than charity shops, which is a bit sad. I can see an idea there. Sometimes the more fun things is lower down in the table, because I quite like the don't know if it's good or not, but you've got funeral directory, books, bicycles, and then mobile phone shops, and then alcohol shops, actually. So again, in OpenStreetMap, and it probably reflects the kind of mappers we are at this point, rather than necessarily the makeup of the shops. There's more bike shops, mobile phone shops than off licenses. I suspect this is, and again, what I think is interesting this year is actually the percentage change are quite big. We're mapping more and more stuff. Yeah, from what I understand, shops are closing. So actually, I think probably once we've got everything mapped in this area. So I think there's a challenge here, really, and I think it's twofold. One is mapping shops, points of interest, amenities in the first place. And then the second part of that is actually keeping that data up to date, because actually there's no point in mapping something like that unless we can refresh it. So, and if nobody's visiting to do that, we can't. Also at the bottom of the list, I thought there was 5 cannabis shops and 5 wig shops, 1 Halloween shop and 3 Christmas shops, and 2 ironing shops, and 1 stove shop. And I don't think it is this one, but there's someone, again, it's on that, what kind of shop is it? It's called Feeds and Stoves and Calendar, and it says on their website all the essentials for country living, because it is both a pet shop and a stove, like a wood-burning stove shop. Who knew? Again, it's kind of funny, because I think with mapping, you start looking in the world in a different way, because nobody else in the family had noticed that, and I've been there with friends, and they were like, I was like, have you seen that shop? And I was like, it does food, pet food, and I mean, it's clearly a couple, and one of them likes pets, and one of them likes stoves, I think. Who knows? I also did a quick look at amenities. I don't have too much time left. A lot of parking spaces, a lot of benches, a lot of post boxes, and then the classic cafes and things. But again, we're adding a lot of these things all the time. So I think this is really where a lot of the progress is. I think the other bit, and I've not done any slides on that, is buildings. Little story here, just a bit of copyright chasing, and I think it probably happens everywhere. Someone noticed that the Fringe programme, this is a photo from it, it's pretty obviously OpenStreetMap. I think all of us look at that and you go, that's OpenStreetMap. And the Fringe programme, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's about that thick. It's got 30,000 shows or something like that. And so I went all the way through it, no sign of any attributions. I emailed them, got quite a nice email back. They were like, are you sure? We didn't think we'd use any OpenStreetMap. Weirdly enough, it was also from someone I kind of vaguely knew and met on various festival events, things in the past. So I was quite pleased I sent it quite nicely. They fixed up the attribution on the website, because I'd also noticed that. Because, yeah, that's the Fringe Office one. But then they kind of came back and they were like, we've looked, they use ArcGIS. We can't see where we've used OpenStreetMap data. Are you sure? So that kind of starts entering, well, we have the name of the Short Holes Golf Course, which we don't actually display on OpenStreetMap standard rendering, but that is a kind of a name that I'm pretty sure is only in OpenStreetMap. This is a bit of an aside. While we've got the meadows up, we had a note to say, should we use the Mario naming scheme as an alternative name? And this comes from a Reddit post. The suggestion being to the sections of the meadows should be named after characters. The answer is no. I don't think it ever took off. But it was funny that I think I saw this 10, 15 years ago. It had obviously come back up again. Anyway, back to the previous one. Well, it's kind of fun when you start looking at the data, as you can kind of spot things. And so one of the things that was on the Fringe Office one was the name of this hotel. Now, this hotel kind of got that far up the ground and stopped. And we had a name that it was going to be on there for about 3 months. So we can pretty much date the data. And I can kind of go, I can't think that name of that hotel that hasn't yet been built is on any other map. And then there's other things in there. that you can, when you start looking, I'm not going to go too far, but it's the details around the car parks. Again, nobody else is really mapping those service roads like we do. Just the little details that kind of, even on their printed maps, they probably had too much details. They kind of got back to me saying, this is what ArcGIS tells us we've used. And it's a long list of people on there, and it's clearly all from OpenStreetMap, so it's telling Porky. So the girl was saying they're going to get in touch before they do next year's program, which actually isn't that far away, and make sure they get it right for us. So it's kind of, I think it's a win. We did it friendly. One more thing, right at the very north of Shetland up there, zooming in, there's a spaceport. There we go, and it's mapped in OpenStreetMap. And I only know it's there because someone was mapping it. There we go. That is me. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So can I invite questions, and again just try to keep questions fairly concise so that we have a chance of repeating them for posterity here. Let's start with yourself.
Are all the fringe venues on OpenStreetMap? Is there an opportunity for a little bit of engagement there? Because I hate it during the fringe when it's all the buildings suddenly all just change names as even related now, like there's multiple Pleasances, and do they go in there somewhere? Is there any way?
Yeah, really good question about fringe venue. I did propose something maybe 10, 15 years ago and started doing it and sort of ran out of steam, got distracted. But Bjorn and I, and I think some of the others in Edinburgh, you should come to the pub meetups, I should say that. Every third Tuesday, usually around, check, it's usually on the wiki a couple of days before where we're going to meet up. I think that's probably something that we want to do a bit more of, and I think there's enough momentum there. And I'm definitely going to ping the fringe office and just see if they can let us have a list of the venues and locations. I think we're probably in quite a good place with them actually having had it. Again, that's what's good about making these discussions nice, is you can kind of go, oh, actually, can you give us this data? And I think that they will, and we can add it in. They use OpenStreetMap on their website as well, so it makes sense to use the same thing in your printed program. Yeah.
Another question?
On the subject of mapping shops and turnover and churn, do you have the count of vape shops at the moment? That's something that seems to have rocketed on the high street.
I could definitely have a look and tell you.
You repeat the question.
Oh, so the question is, do I have the count of vape shops? I'm not going to try and do it live now, but I'll do it in 2 minutes when we finish. Writing SQL live is never a good idea. Is that Bob? Did you have something? No? Excellent. How long would it be?
Okay.
Yeah, that gives 5 minutes for the next person to get ready.
Yeah.
Unless I go and do a vape shop count.
Well, I was on the subject of your question about buildings changing names. I think that OpenStreetMap, this conference is getting its own back by changing the regular names of the rooms in Abertay here. So
that's true, isn't it?
So maybe there's a counter strategy. But in addition to vape shops, I think sort of nail bars, tattoo parlours, tanning salons. Be interesting to see about all of those and how.
Let's see. I can probably find my list of names in my. I had a big list in here. So this is the big list. What are we looking for? Do we do vapes as vapes? I should. So I think a lot of the beauty ones come in as shop beauty.
Yeah.
Why is it not finding vape? What are vape shops? They will be in there somewhere, but
It could almost be the modern version of a tobacco list.
yeah, which they kind of are, aren't they? There is right at the bottom of the list. I did see a smoking shop, and there's not many of those left.
Shop equals e-cigarette.
E-cigarette.
E-cigarette. Yeah.
There we go. 154. We've added 25 in this year. So again, there's probably more than that, I suspect. Yeah. And again, a lot of those are combined with news agents. So you just do they end up being mapped as just as a news agent, or do you do it's a news agent and a vape shop as two nodes, as a kind of one of those interesting questions. It's a bit of a judgment call on whoever's mapping it. Yeah.
There's one more question over here.
Yeah, quick question. Since golf is a Scottish sport, I was wondering if you knew how Scotland maps its golf courses as opposed to the rest of the world. Are we ahead of that, or are we lagging behind?
Bob at the back there is responsible for doing actually most of the mapping I'm going to in Scotland, and I think Bob did an excellent job of mapping a lot of all our golf courses very early on. I think Scottish golf courses. You saw just like the short hole course there. I think most golf courses in Scotland are mapped world class. I was going to say as you'd expect. But you can challenge me on that later because I don't know how well golf courses are mapped anywhere else in the world. So that's the caveat there.
Okay.
Yeah.
One more question. If you could repeat the question.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, what are your future directions or ideas to map more special features, or do you have any ideas what to do going forward?
It's a good question. So what should we be doing? What do we want to do going forward? As someone said, I think in one of the other sessions, you can't really further, but you can kind of encourage people. I still think there's things to finish, like actually getting all the buildings mapped, getting all the addresses in. Actually, I've kind of showed you a nice picture of Edinburgh, getting all of Scotland up to that standard. We're not there yet. There's a lot of so I think that's a good long. And then actually, once you're there, there'll always be the next level thing. You're getting the buildings mapped, making them sure they're all addressed. I think probably, and then that level of detail on the other stuff is where we are. Thanks. Excellent.
Thanks very much indeed, again to Chris for our first talk, and we'll move over now. Keep the focus on Scotland, but invite Donald to give a talk on mapping.